Have you ever been humiliated just because of your weight? In the middle of a party, in front of everyone, I was called unworthy of being a wife, simply because of my waistline. And the person I trusted most stayed silent, leaving me there as a joke. But from that moment of humiliation, I found the strength to change everything. I stood in the center of Richard's birthday gala, my champagne glass trembling, while his mother's voice sliced through the Mozart quartet like a knife. "My son built an empire," Charlotte Mitchell announced to the 100 guests in our Manhattan penthouse. Her diamond-laden fingers gestured toward me with theatrical disgust. "And she built a 40-inch waistline." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Not loud, not cruel, worse, polite, knowing. Richard's hand touched my lower back, the touch I'd once mistaken for support now revealed as control. "Mom, please." "No, darling. Someone needs to say it. You deserve better than this situation." My champagne glass slipped, exploding against the marble. In the sudden silence, I heard phones clicking, recording. "Excuse me," I whispered. As I fled toward the bathroom, I caught Vanessa's reflection. Richard's personal trainer, his constant companion. She wasn't laughing. She was watching with something like pity or satisfaction. I locked myself in the bathroom and stared at my reflection. 32 years old, 80 pounds heavier than my wedding day 5 years ago. Face puffy from hormones, failed IVF attempts, medications that only made everything worse. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. "The video's already viral. Hashtag Richard Mitchell, wife." I shouldn't have looked, but I did. If I was that rich, I'd have divorced her years ago. She clearly gave up. No wonder he spends so much time at the gym. I gripped the marble countertop. Through the door, I heard Richard's smooth voice. "She's been struggling. The infertility treatments have been difficult." Murmurs of sympathy. For him, always for him. I opened the medicine cabinet. Instead of Xanax, I found a receipt tucked behind bottles. Tiffany & Compton, $47,000. Dated 3 days ago, I hadn't received any gift. I photographed the receipt, sensing it mattered, though I didn't understand why. Then I fixed my makeup and opened the door. The party continued for 2 hours. I smiled, I nodded, I played the grateful, apologetic wife. But something had broken inside me, or perhaps something had finally woken up. 6 months before Charlotte's execution of my dignity, I was still pretending we had a marriage. I'd wake at 5:30 a.m. when Richard's alarm shattered the silence. He'd be gone before I opened my eyes, off to his 6 a.m. session with Vanessa, then his office at Mitchell Capital Management by 8. I'd spend mornings in our 4,000 square foot prison of marble and glass, trying to remember the Laura who'd graduated summa cum laude from Columbia, who'd had her own marketing career before Richard convinced me his career needed my full support. "We're building something together," he'd said. "My firm will be our legacy." I'd believed him. The weight came gradually, then all at once. First, the stress of being Mrs. Richard Mitchell. Charity galas, client dinners, endless performance. Then fertility treatments, Clomid, injectables, IVF. 3 rounds, each pumping my body full of hormones that made me ravenous and exhausted. "Maybe you should try harder with the diet," Richard suggested after the second failed round. "Weight affects fertility. You need to take this seriously, Laura." I was taking it seriously. I was taking it so seriously, I'd stopped eating in public, stopped seeing friends, stopped existing anywhere except between failure and hope. By his birthday party, our conversations were logistics and reproach. "Did you pick up my dry cleaning? Please try to, make an effort." I knew. I always knew. Vanessa had entered our lives a year earlier, recommended by Charlotte. 26, with a body that looked photoshopped even in person. She was sweet, always asking about my day, complimenting my outfits, offering advice about gentle exercise. "Your husband works so hard," she'd say. "He's lucky to have someone who understands his ambitions." I'd smile and pretend I didn't notice how his hand lingered on her shoulder when he laughed at her jokes. Financial control had been more subtle. After we married, Richard suggested combining accounts for simplicity. Then I left my job temporarily to manage our home and social obligations. "You're worth more than that," he'd said, kissing my forehead. Let me take care of you. 3 years later, no job, no income, no savings. Every purchase over $200 required his approval. It's not about trust, it's about financial discipline. Charlotte had her own control, stopping by unannounced, scanning every surface for dust, every meal for excess. Richard deserves a wife who can maintain herself. Self-discipline is a virtue, dear. She had secrets too. Whispered phone conversations about the Singapore account and what father would have wanted. Once I'd found a locked file cabinet with Charlotte's name. When I asked, Richard snapped, the only time he'd raised his voice before the end. My family's business is not your concern. Focus on what you can control, Laura. What I could control, my weight apparently, my appearance, my ambitions, my voice. The night of the party, lying alone while Richard worked in his office, I realized I controlled nothing, except perhaps the receipt I'd photographed. I opened my phone, created a hidden folder, titled it Evidence, though I didn't know what crime I was documenting. Then I lay awake wondering who exactly I'd married. 3 weeks after the birthday party, Richard asked me to meet him at his attorney's office. Just estate planning updates, he'd said. Nothing major. I should have known. Thomas Brennan, Esquire, sat at the head of the conference table, silver-haired, expensive. Next to him sat a woman I didn't recognize. Mrs. Mitchell, Brennan said, not rising. Please, sit. Richard pulled out my chair. We'll keep this brief, Brennan continued, sliding documents across the table. Mr. Mitchell is filing for divorce. This is your copy of the petition. The words hit like a physical blow. What? It's better this way, Richard said, voice gentle. We've grown apart, Laura. You must have felt it too. I stared at him. His expression was sympathetic, the same expression when explaining why I needed to leave my job, try harder, why everything was my failure disguised as his concern. The grounds are irreconcilable differences, the female attorney said. Additionally, your inability to conceive. Mr. Mitchell has made clear his desire for children. You're divorcing me because I can't get pregnant? Among other reasons. Richard folded his hands. I need a partner who can support my ambitions, someone who can represent the Mitchell family appropriately, someone who, he gestured vaguely, someone who takes care of themselves. There it was, too fat, too broken, too embarrassing. You have 72 hours to vacate the penthouse, Brennan said. As for assets? Assets? There's a prenuptial agreement. Surely you remember. I did remember, sort of. The week before our wedding, papers to sign. Just standard stuff, Richard had said. I'd signed without reading carefully. The prenup specifies a flat settlement of $100,000, the female attorney explained. No claim to Mitchell capital, no real estate, no spousal support beyond 18 months. $100,000 for 5 years of my life. That's not legal, I whispered. Marital property. The prenup was ironclad, witnessed by your own attorney. Paid for with Richard's money since I'd had none. I need time. I need my own lawyer. Of course, but the timeline remains. 72 hours. Richard pulled out his phone, tapped something. I've suspended your credit cards. The apartment I've arranged is paid through the month. After that, you'll manage with settlement funds. You're cutting me off? Completely? It's cleaner this way. I stood. 5 years. I gave you 5 years. And I'm grateful. But this isn't working, Laura. You can start fresh. Lose the weight. Find someone more suitable to your lifestyle. I ran. Down the stairs. Out into Manhattan afternoon, where people flowed past me like I was invisible. I found myself in Bryant Park, staring at nothing. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Sorry about the timing. He wanted me to wait until after his birthday. I didn't feel right about that. Sophie. Sophie. Richard's assistant. Another text. There's more you should know. Call me when ready. I opened my hidden folder and took a screenshot. Evidence. Then I searched. Divorce attorney's Manhattan prenuptial agreement challenge. The third result was Miller and Associates. Managing partner Grace Miller, Columbia Law Zo 8, 2 years ahead of me. I remembered her. Everyone had remembered Grace Miller, scholarship kid from Queens who'd torn through law school, clerked for a federal judge, started her own firm specializing in complex matrimonial disputes. I called. Miller and Associates. I need Grace Miller, I said. Tell her it's Laura Chen, from Columbia. Tell her I need help proving I was manipulated into signing away my rights. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., I'll be there. I sat until sunset, then called the one person I'd pushed away during these years. Laura? My sister's voice was shocked. Laura, is that you? Rachel, I said, crying. Rachel, I need help. I need a place to stay. I'm texting you my address right now. Get in a cab. Whatever happened, we'll figure it out. I looked at my phone, Rachel's address in Brooklyn, Sophie's number, waiting, and in my hidden folder, a receipt for $47,000 birthday party video, screenshots of credit card alerts. It wasn't much, but it was something. I hailed a cab. The war hadn't started yet, but I'd just enlisted. Grace Miller's office was a converted Chelsea townhouse with mismatched furniture, walls covered in case files, and a coffee maker older than I was. Grace hadn't changed since college, sharp-eyed, intense, wearing suits that meant business without trying to impress. Laura Chen, she said, I remember you. You were dating that economics guy who thought he was the next Warren Buffett. Richard Mitchell, and I married him. Ah, I've heard of him. Mitchell Capital Management. She leaned back. And now you're here. I told her everything. The birthday party, the ambush, the prenup, the systematic isolation, the credit cards cut off. Grace listened without interrupting. First question, she said finally. Do you want to fight or take the settlement and move on? Because fighting Richard Mitchell is expensive, exhausting, and ugly. I want to fight. Why? The question caught me off guard. Because it's not fair. That's not enough. Fair doesn't matter in court. What matters is what we can prove. So I'm asking why? What's the goal? I thought about Charlotte's laughter, about Richard's controlling hand, about 5 years of disappearing. I want my life back, not the life I had with him, the life I gave up. And I want him to pay for taking it, Grace smiled. Now we can work with that. She pulled out a legal pad. Here's reality. Your prenup is probably enforceable unless we can prove fraud, duress, or unconscionability. Did you have independent counsel? Richard arranged the attorney. Red flag. Did you have time to review? A week before the wedding, Richard kept saying it was standard. Red flag too. We might have grounds to challenge. She looked up. But we need more. Evidence of manipulation, financial abuse, maybe fraud. He tracked all my purchases. Every transaction triggered alerts. That's control, not necessarily illegal. We need something harder, hidden assets. Evidence he deliberately undermined your ability to earn income. I pulled out my phone, showed the receipt. Tiffany's, $47,000. I never received anything. Grace's eyes sharpened. When? 3 days before his birthday, April 2nd. Show me. She photographed it. This is good. If we prove this was a gift to someone else, it shows inappropriate spending of marital assets. Do you know who received it? No, but his assistant texted. Sophie. She said there was more I should know. Call her, now. Sophie picked up on the second ring. We arranged to meet. Grace returned to her notes. We need 3 evidence layers, financial, witnesses, and lost earning capacity. The Tiffany receipt is a start. We need bank statements, credit records, documents related to business holdings. I don't have access anymore. We'll subpoena in discovery, but anything you can get now is faster. Grace made notes. Who knows about the affairs? The financial control? His mother, Vanessa. I think she's the mistress. Sophie. The housekeeper, Rosa. I'll need contact information. Domestic employees see everything. Grace checked her watch. We'll get your personnel file from your old job, calculate what you would have earned. That's income you lost because he asked you to quit. My phone buzzed. Rosa, Sophie gave me your number. I have something you need to see. Can you come tomorrow? I don't want anyone knowing we talked. I showed Grace. Go. Whatever she has, get it, photograph it, record it. Don't take originals unless she insists. She handed me a digital recorder. New York is one-party consent. As long as you're a part of the conversation, it's legal. One more thing, Grace said. This will get worse before it gets better. Richard will escalate. He'll try to intimidate you, isolate you, destroy your credibility. I'm ready. She smiled sadly. No one's ever ready, but you'll survive it. Sophie was at the coffee shop, hunched over a laptop, wearing sunglasses indoors. Thank you for meeting, I said. She pulled off the sunglasses, eyes red. I should have told you sooner. I needed this job. My mom's sick, insurance... She stopped. That's not an excuse. Told me what? Sophie turned her laptop toward me. Email thread between Richard and V. Cruz at fuelfitnessnoise.com. Vanessa. R. Need you to keep her busy Monday. New jewelry pickup. V. The usual place? She's getting suspicious. Year. She's not smart enough to be suspicious. Keep reading. R. Charlotte's handling the party. She'll make sure everyone sees what a disaster this marriage has become. Vai. Is that necessary? The public humiliation feels cruel. Rao. It's necessary for the divorce narrative. I need her looking unstable. The prenup is solid, but I can't risk her making me look bad. There's more, Sophie said. He's been planning this 8 months. The birthday party was staged. Your mother-in-law knew, Vanessa knew, I knew, and I helped. And I'm sorry. Why now? Because yesterday he called me in and said my services wouldn't be needed after the divorce. Then he tried to... She swallowed. He's not good, Laura. He's cruel. I don't want to be part of it. Can I have copies? I already made a file. Everything about the divorce planning, the affair, and... She pulled up another folder. This, I don't fully understand it, but I think it's bad. Singapore Holdings. Inside were wire transfers, corporate filings, bank statements from HSBC Singapore. What am I looking at? Richard's been moving money offshore for 2 years. These accounts aren't in his name, they're under Mitchell Family Trust. His mother is trustee, he's primary beneficiary. Over $3 million not disclosed in the divorce filing. $3 million, hidden in Singapore, while claiming $100,000 was more than fair. Sophie, if I use this, you'll be called to testify. Richard will know you're the source. I know. I have my own lawyer, and honestly, I'm more scared of becoming someone who can watch this happen and do nothing. I took her hand. Thank you. Destroy him, Laura. He deserves it. And Rosa's apartment was Washington Heights' 4th floor walk-up. She opened the door, glancing nervously up and down the hallway. Come in quickly. Her living room was immaculate. Plastic-covered furniture, photos of children, an altar with a candle beneath the Virgin Mary. I shouldn't do this, Rosa said, pulling a cardboard box from beneath her couch. But Mr. Mitchell, he is not good man, and you were always coned. You asked about my children. What is this? Things I found when I cleaned, things in trash, things in drawers. I kept them because... She shrugged. Instinct, but now I think God wanted me to keep them. Inside, receipts, hotels, restaurants, jewelry stores, a lease agreement for an Upper East Side apartment, $8,500 month, V. Cruz, tenant, R. Mitchell, guarantor. He's been paying for her apartment? I breathed. For 7 months? Rosa pulled out another document. And this. I found this in his office trash 3 weeks ago. An handwritten letter, torn and taped back together. Charlotte's handwriting. Richard, we've discussed this. The offshore accounts are family money, not marital assets. Keep Laura ignorant of Singapore Holdings until after divorce is final. Thomas assures the prenup will hold, but we can't risk her having time to challenge. The faster we move, the cleaner this will be. Rosa watched me read. That's fraud. Yes, hiding money? Yes, that's fraud. Good, then use it. Make him pay. They'll ask how I got this. They'll say it's theft. You didn't take it from his home. You took it from me and I found it in trash. Trash is abandoned property, no expectation of privacy. She smiled slightly. My son is in law school, he explained. That night in Rachel's spare bedroom, I spread everything out. Tiffany receipt, $47,000, Sophie's emails, proof of premeditation and affair. Singapore documents, $3 million hidden. Apartment lease, financial support for Mistress Charlotte's letter, conspiracy to commit fraud. Rosa's receipts, pattern of inappropriate spending. Grace had said we needed 3 layers. I had 2, and they were better than I'd dared hope. My phone rang. Grace. I just got a call from Thomas Brennan. Richard is accusing you of stealing documents. He wants you arrested. My stomach dropped. I know. I told Brennan any documents you have were provided voluntarily by witnesses or found in abandoned property. He's bluffing, trying to scare you into backing down. What do we do? We file tomorrow. We challenge the prenup on grounds of inadequate counsel and duress. We demand full disclosure of all assets, including offshore accounts. We request emergency spousal support and exclusive use of marital residence pending trial. We file to compel discovery of all financial records. That'll make him furious. Good. Furious people make mistakes. And Laura, this is your last chance to walk away. Once we file, there's no going back. He'll throw everything at you, your weight, your mental health, your fitness as a person. He'll drag you through mud. Are you sure? I looked at the evidence. $3 million hidden while he told me $100,000 was generous. 8 months planning my humiliation. Charlotte's letter calling me ignorant. I'm sure. Then let's go to war. I opened my laptop, created a new document. The truth about Richard Mitchell. I'd spent 5 years being silenced, 5 years making myself smaller. That ended tonight. I started typing. My name is Laura Mitchell, and this is the story of how my husband and his family tried to steal my life. Grace filed our response Friday afternoon. Richard would receive it heading into his weekend. Phone calls started within an hour, Thomas Brennan demanding to know where we'd obtained privileged financial documents. Then an unknown number, probably Charlotte. I didn't answer. Then Richard. You're making a mistake. I tried to be generous. Now you'll get nothing. I deleted it. Monday morning, Grace called with an edge in her voice. We have a problem. My stomach clenched. What kind? Richard filed an emergency motion. He's claiming you're mentally unstable and requesting psychiatric evaluation. He's submitted affidavits from 3 medical professionals stating you have a history of depression, anxiety, disordered eating. He's arguing any evidence you've gathered is paranoid delusions and you're not competent to participate. The room tilted. What? I've never seen a psychiatrist. I know, but the affidavits are detailed. Medications, therapy sessions, hospitalizations. If I didn't know better, I'd believe them. That's impossible. Then he manufactured it. We need to figure out how, fast, because the judge granted a hearing for Thursday. If Richard convinces the court you're unstable, he can freeze our entire case. It could take months. He's that scared of what we found? He's that smart. He knows we have fraud evidence, so he's attacking your credibility first. Grace paused. There's more. One doctor who signed an affidavit is Dr. Patricia Wainwright. Want to guess who sits on her clinic's board? Charlotte. Correct. The second doctor received 3 donations to his research foundation from Mitchell Capital over 2 years. The third is Dr. Howard Blake, who supposedly treated you during IVF. I never had a psychiatrist during IVF, just the fertility doctor and... Wait, there was a counselor, 1 session each round. But that was Dr. Helen Brooks, not Howard Blake. Can you prove that? The clinic will have records, Riverside Fertility Center. I'm subpoenaing them today. But even if we prove Blake never treated you, that's only 1 affidavit. We still have 2 medical professionals willing to lie for Richard. I thought about the Singapore accounts. $3 million bought a lot of cooperation. What do? We go on offense? I'm filing to compel Richard to submit to psychiatric evaluation too. If he wants to play mental health, we'll make him prove he's stable enough to run a firm while conducting affairs and committing fraud. I'm also requesting emergency forensic audit of his medical claims. But mostly, Grace's voice hardened. We need to figure out what he's really hiding. This level of retaliation? He's not just trying to win, he's trying to destroy you, which means we're close to something bigger. After we hung up, I stared at my evidence boxes. What was I missing? My phone buzzed. Unknown number. This is Ethan Cole. I'm the accountant at Mitchell Capital. We've never met, but Richard is planning to blame the Singapore accounts on me. I have proof I had nothing to do with them. Can we talk? I forwarded to Grace, then called. Mr. Cole? Please, Ethan. His voice was young, nervous. I know I should go through lawyers, but I don't have time. Richard called me in this morning and told me to prepare to testify I set up offshore accounts without his knowledge. He said if I refused, he'd make sure I never worked in finance again. Why are you telling me? Because I'm not going to prison for him. I've been with Mitchell Capital 4 years. I've watched him cut corners, hide assets, manipulate investors. I stayed quiet because I needed the job, but I won't be his scapegoat. He took a breath. The Singapore accounts are just the start. There's a whole network. Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Delaware shell companies. He's been siphoning money from investors for 3 years. My mouth went dry. That's securities fraud. It's worse. Some investors are pension funds, teachers' retirement accounts. If this comes out, thousands lose their savings. That's why he's desperate to shut you down. You're not just threatening his marriage, you're threatening his entire empire. Do you have proof? I have everything. Spreadsheets, wire transfers, emails where he explicitly tells me to be creative with accounting. I kept copies because I knew he'd try to throw me under the bus someday. I just didn't think it would be this soon. Why not go to the SEC or FBI? Long pause. Because I helped him, Laura. Not the fraud itself, but I signed documents I should have questioned. I looked the other way. If this goes federal, I'm implicated. But in a divorce case, I'm just a witness. Your attorney can use evidence without exposing me to criminal charges. Self-serving, but it made sense. And if true, we had leverage I hadn't imagined. I need to talk to my attorney. Can you send what you have? I'll email everything tonight, but Laura, be careful. Richard isn't just rich and connected. He's dangerous when cornered. The psychiatric evaluation thing, that's mild compared to what he'll do if he thinks you're actually going to expose him. After we hung up, I sat in darkness, mind racing. Richard wasn't just hiding assets. He was running a criminal enterprise. And I'd been living with him, sleeping beside him, trusting him for 5 years while he defrauded pensioners and teachers. I barely made it to the bathroom before throwing up. When Rachel came home, she found me on the bathroom floor reading files Ethan had sent. Laura, are you okay? I looked up. I married a monster. I know, sweetie. No, you don't understand. It's not just the affair or divorce or even fraud. Look at this. I showed her an email dated 6 months before Richard filed for divorce. Richard to Vanessa. The weight gain is perfect. The more she lets herself go, the easier the divorce narrative becomes. Everyone will understand why I had to leave. Keep encouraging her to be comfortable and not stress about appearance. The worse she looks, the better I look. He wanted me to gain weight and, I whispered. He encouraged it. All those dinners where he'd order rich food and tell me I deserved to enjoy myself, he was setting me up, making me into the wife he could discard without anyone questioning. Rachel took the phone. That's psychological abuse, calculated, deliberate cruelty. And it worked. Even I believed it was my fault. Laura, I need to destroy him, Rachel. Not just win the divorce, not just get money. I need to make sure everyone knows what he did. That's anger talking. No. I stood, steadier than I'd felt in days. That's clarity. He tried to make me disappear, to become so small and worthless no one would question when he threw me away. But he made a mistake. He assumed I'd stay small. What are you going to do? I thought about the evidence boxes, about Sophie's emails, Rosa's receipts, Ethan's financial records, about the story I'd started writing. I'm going to get bigger. So big he can't ignore me, so visible he can't make me disappear even if he tries. The psychiatric hearing was scheduled Thursday at 2 p.m. Grace spent Tuesday and Wednesday preparing our countermotion, gathering my real medical records, deposing Dr. Brooks from the fertility clinic. Wednesday night, she called. Dr. Blake doesn't exist, at least not in any medical database in New York. The licensing number belongs to a Dr. Howard Blake who died in 2019. Someone created a fake doctor to bolster Richard's case. That's perjury, that's fraud. That's checkmate. I'm filing an emergency motion to dismiss Richard's psychiatric claims and requesting sanctions against his legal team for submitting false evidence. Thomas Brennan is going to have a very bad day tomorrow. But I couldn't sleep. Something about Ethan's warning kept echoing. Richard is dangerous when cornered. At 3 a.m., my phone rang, Rachel's number. Laura, someone broke into my apartment. They didn't take anything. They just photographed all your stuff, the evidence boxes, your laptop, everything. My blood went cold. Where are you? At the precinct. Grace is on her way. She said to go to a hotel. Use cash. Don't tell anyone where you are, not even me. After Rachel hung up, I sat in the dark, heart hammering. He'd sent someone to break into my sister's apartment, to show me nowhere was safe. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. You should have taken the $100K, Laura. Now things get ugly. Drop the fraud claims by Friday or I'll make sure everyone knows about your little drug problem. The prescription pills, the addiction treatment, Silver Hill Psychiatric Facility. It'll be your word against documented history. Who do you think they'll believe? There was no drug problem, no addiction, no psychiatric facility. But he could create one just like he created Dr. Howard Blake. I took a screenshot, forwarded to Grace, then typed, "See you in court tomorrow. Bring your fake doctors. I'll bring my real evidence." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. No response. I packed a bag with physical evidence. Rosa's box was at Grace's office, thank God, and left while it was dark. Found a hotel in Queens that took cash, checked in under a fake name. And then I did something I should have done weeks ago. I opened my laptop and started a blog post. I titled it, "The Perfect Weight of Revenge: How My Husband Tried to Erase Me." And I started writing everything: the birthday party, the divorce ambush, the hidden accounts, the manufactured psychiatric records, the break-in, not for the judge, for everyone. Because Richard Mitchell had spent years controlling the narrative. It was time to take that control back. I wrote until dawn, until my fingers ached, until I'd purged every moment of humiliation and rage and fear. Then I saved it as a draft and went to court. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Richard sat with Thomas Brennan and 2 associates, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than my settlement offer. He didn't look at me. Charlotte sat behind him, spine rigid. Vanessa was there too, in the back row, arms crossed defensively. Grace was already at our table, surrounded by file boxes. "Ready?" she asked. "Born ready." Judge Mariana Torres entered, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and an expression suggesting she'd heard every lie and wasn't impressed. "This is a hearing on defendant's motion for psychiatric evaluation," she began. "Mr. Brennan, make your case." Brennan stood, smooth and confident. "Your Honor, my client is concerned about his estranged wife's mental state. Over past weeks, Mrs. Mitchell has made increasingly erratic accusations. Hidden assets, offshore fraud, conspiracy. She's submitted documents she claims were found in trash or provided by witnesses she refuses to name. This behavior is consistent with paranoid delusions, and we have 3 psychiatric evaluations supporting our concern." "Miss Miller?" Grace rose. "Your Honor, we have significant concerns about validity of these so-called evaluations. We've discovered one doctor who signed an affidavit. Howard Blake does not exist. The medical license number provided belongs to a deceased physician. This appears to be deliberate attempt to submit false evidence." The courtroom went silent. Richard's face remained neutral, but I saw Brennan's jaw tighten. "That's serious, Ms. Miller," Judge Torres said. "Do you have proof?" Grace approached the bench with a folder. "Medical licensing board records, death certificate for real Howard Blake, and declaration from Dr. Helen Brooks." the therapist who actually treated Mrs. Mitchell, confirming she never exhibited any signs of mental illness. Judge Torres reviewed documents, her expression darkening. Mr. Brennan, did you verify credentials of doctors submitting affidavits? Your Honor, we relied on information provided by... Yes or no, Counselor, did you verify? A pause. We did not independently verify, Your Honor. Then you submitted unverified medical testimony to my court in an attempt to have a woman declared mentally incompetent. That's not just malpractice, Mr. Brennan. That's potential fraud upon the court. She turned to Grace. Ms. Miller, I'm granting your motion to dismiss the psychiatric evaluation request. I'm also ordering Mr. Mitchell to show cause why he should not be sanctioned for this behavior, and I'm referring this to the Bar Disciplinary Committee. Richard finally moved, leaning over to whisper urgently to Brennan. Furthermore, Judge Torres continued, given questions raised about Mr. Mitchell's truthfulness, I'm granting Ms. Miller's motion to compel full financial disclosure. Mr. Mitchell, you have 30 days to produce complete records of all assets, domestic and foreign, including accounts held in trust or through corporate entities. Failure to comply will result in adverse inference, meaning I'll assume Ms. Mitchell's allegations about hidden assets are true. Your Honor, Brennan began. I'm not finished. I'm also granting Miss Miller's request for emergency spousal support. Mr. Mitchell will pay Mrs. Mitchell $10,000 per month pending resolution, retroactive to when he terminated her credit cards. That's $40,000 due immediately. I felt Grace squeeze my hand. And finally, Judge Torres fixed Richard with a cold stare. If I find out there have been any attempts to intimidate, threaten, or harass Mrs. Mitchell during these proceedings, I will hold you in contempt. Do you understand, Mr. Mitchell? Richard stood. Yes, Your Honor. Good. We're adjourned. The gavel came down. As we filed out, I caught Richard's eye for the first time. His expression was no longer neutral. It was murderous. Outside, Grace pulled me aside. That was a clean sweep. But Laura, you understand this makes you more dangerous to him, not less? I know. The break-in, the threatening text, that's going to escalate. Let him think I'm going to back down. I pulled out my phone, opened the blog draft. Grace, how would you feel about me going public? Telling my story to everyone? She hesitated. It could contaminate the case. Make it harder to seat an impartial jury. Or it could put pressure on him to settle before his fraud becomes public. Once people know, every investor will start asking questions. The SEC will have to investigate. He'll have more to worry about than our divorce. Grace studied me for a long moment. You've changed. I'm done being small. Then do it. But be prepared. Once that story is out there, there's no taking it back. You'll be judged, questioned, picked apart. It won't all be support. I know, but right now Richard controls the narrative. Everyone saw me humiliated at his party. Everyone thinks I'm the bitter, fat wife. It's time they knew the truth. That night, I published the blog post. Within 6 hours, it had 10,000 views. Within 24 hours, it was viral. And Richard Mitchell's perfect life began to crumble. The blog post exploded. By Friday morning, 60,000 shares. By Saturday, major outlets picking it up. Venture capitalist's wife exposes alleged fraud. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, morning shows, podcast hosts. Grace set up a media shield, but the attention was overwhelming. Then messages started coming in from other women. Your story is my story. My husband did the same thing. Thank you for speaking up. I work at Mitchell Capital. You need to know it's worse than you think. The culture is toxic. Richard isn't an outlier. He's the example. I invested my retirement with Mitchell Capital. After reading your post, I requested an audit. They're stalling. Should I be worried? That last message made my stomach turn. Ethan had been right about the pension funds. By Monday, the SEC had opened an informal inquiry. By Tuesday, 3 major investors had filed suit demanding full disclosure. And Richard? Richard went nuclear. Wednesday morning, I woke to my face on the New York Post. Mitchell's ex-hero or hustler, the article was a hatchet job. Anonymous sources painting me as a gold digger, a liar, and attention seeker who'd fabricated evidence. Laura Chen was a mediocre marketing associate who targeted Richard Mitchell the moment she learned about his family wealth. She gained weight deliberately to trap him with fertility treatments. And then the final blow. A photo from the birthday party, mid-stumble, champagne glass falling, face distorted. The caption, "Picture of stability." Grace called immediately. "Don't read the comments." Too late. I was already scrolling through Twitter. "She just wants his money, classic bitter ex-wife. Gaining 80 pounds and blaming your husband seems like a red flag to me. If he was really abusing her, why did she stay?" "Laura, are you listening?" Grace's voice cut through. "This is a coordinated PR campaign. Richard hired a crisis management firm. They're going to throw everything at you. We knew this was coming." "It doesn't make it easier." "No, but here's what matters. The SEC inquiry is real. The investor lawsuits are real. Judge Torres ordered financial disclosure. Richard can win the PR battle and still lose the war. Stay focused on what we can prove." After we hung up, I forced myself to close Twitter and focus on the one thing I could control, my own story. I'd started a TikTok account the day after the blog post went viral. Just me talking directly to camera about the divorce, the evidence, the legal process. My first video got 2 million views. Day 15 of my divorce. Today, my husband's lawyer accused me of theft. Here's the receipt I stole from his own trash. Let's talk about why rich men think everything belongs to them, including the truth. The comments section became a support group, women sharing their own stories of financial abuse. By Thursday, I had 400,000 followers. Friday afternoon, Grace called with excitement in her voice. "Laura, you need to see this. I'm sending you a link." The link was to a press conference, live happening now. On screen, a woman stood at a podium marked Morrison and Lee, Employment Litigation. She was young, blonde, conventionally attractive. Behind her stood 6 other women. "My name is Jennifer Harrison," she said, voice steady despite visible nerves. 5 years ago, I was hired as an analyst at Mitchell Capital Management. Within 3 months, Richard Mitchell began making unwanted sexual advances. When I rejected him, I was reassigned to projects that made me look incompetent, then fired for performance issues. I was told if I sued, his lawyers would destroy my reputation. She paused. I stayed silent because I was afraid. But after reading Laura Mitchell's story, I realized I wasn't alone. We aren't alone. We're filing a class action lawsuit for sexual harassment, wrongful termination, and retaliation. The press conference continued for 20 minutes. Each woman told a story of harassment, manipulation, retaliation, of NDAs signed under duress, of settlements paid in exchange for silence. By the time it ended, my hands were shaking. Richard hadn't just abused me. He'd abused dozens of women systematically for years. Grace called back. "This changes everything. Jennifer's attorney is using your case as an anchor, arguing that the divorce evidence proves a pattern that gives them grounds to challenge the NDAs. Will it work? It might. NDAs can't protect illegal activity, and Laura, Jennifer's attorney, wants to talk. She thinks there might be more evidence at the penthouse. We can request a police escort to retrieve your personal property." "When?" "Tomorrow." Saturday morning, I stood outside the building I'd lived in for 5 years, flanked by Grace, 2 NYPD officers, and Jennifer's attorney, Diana Lee. The doorman looked uncomfortable. "Mrs. Mitchell, Mr. Mitchell is upstairs." "He was notified," Grace said firmly. "We have a court order." We rode the elevator in silence. When the doors opened, Richard was waiting in the foyer, arms crossed, expression icy. "This is harassment," he said flatly. "This is legal discovery," Diana replied. "You're welcome to observe, but you may not interfere." "I want my attorney present." "Then call him. We'll wait." And Grace settled onto the sofa like she owned it. Richard pulled out his phone, jabbed at it viciously, then disappeared into his office. "You have 2 hours," Grace told me quietly. "Focus on documents, electronics, anything that might contain evidence." I nodded and headed to the master bedroom. The room looked different. Vanessa's things were everywhere: yoga mats, designer athletic wear, supplements on my former nightstand. She'd moved in. I went to the closet, past my old clothes, to the back where Richard kept personal files. There was a safe hidden behind the suits. I tried the combination, 040224. The date on the Tiffany receipt. The safe clicked open. Inside were stacks of documents, bank statements from HSBC Singapore, wire transfer confirmations, a passport with Richard's photo but a different name, Michael Randall, and at the bottom, a leather journal. Richard's handwriting, dates going back 3 years. Moved $500K to Singapore account, Charlotte convinced. Charlotte told her it's protecting family assets from Laura. Truth, it's insurance for when the fund collapses. Vanessa is perfect. Young enough to be impressed, smart enough to be useful, dumb enough not to ask questions. Laura's fertility struggles are a gift. Gives me grounds for divorce without looking like the bad guy. Need to document her instability, emotional outbursts, weight gain, dependency, building the narrative. Each entry more damning, a meticulous record of manipulation, fraud, premeditation. I photographed every page, then I heard shouting from the living room. I ran out to find Richard blocking Diana's paralegal from accessing his office computer. "You can't take my business files, attorney-client privilege." "Your emails to employees are not privileged," Diana said calmly. "Step aside or we'll have the officers remove you." "You're on a witch hunt. That blogger," he gestured at me, "is a liar trying to destroy me because she's bitter." "Mitchell," one officer said, stepping forward, "you need to calm down." "I will not be calm. These women are ransacking my home based on fabricated accusations from a mentally unstable—" "Choose your next words carefully," Grace interrupted, voice like ice. "Because if you call my client mentally unstable one more time, I'll add defamation to our lawsuit. We have written proof you manufactured psychiatric evaluations. A judge already sanctioned you. Keep talking." Richard's face turned purple. For a moment, I thought he might strike Grace. Instead, he pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the police." "We are the police," the second officer said, sounding tired. "Sir, you have 2 options. Let them complete their court-authorized search or be removed from the premises." Richard stared at the officer, then at me. His eyes held pure hatred. "This isn't over, Laura." "No," I agreed quietly. "It's not. But you're losing." He stormed into his office and slammed the door. We continued searching. Diana's team found emails dating back 5 years, harassment complaints resolved internally, settlements paid through shell companies, NDAs drafted by Thomas Brennan. In the office file cabinets, I found Charlotte's documents, Singapore trust agreements, proof she'd been complicit in hiding assets since before our marriage. And in Richard's desk drawer, beneath business cards, I found a flash drive labeled Insurance. I handed it to Grace. "What do you think this is?" She plugged it into her laptop. The drive contained folders for each of Richard's investors and video files. Grace opened one randomly. It showed Richard at a restaurant with Marcus Blackwell, a pharmaceutical CEO who'd invested $50 million. In the video, Richard was explaining, so the returns I'm showing you are projections based on if we hit our targets. We haven't actually hit them yet, but you don't need to mention that to your board." "He's been lying to investors," Grace breathed, "and recording himself doing it. Why would he keep evidence of his own fraud?" "Leverage. If an investor threatens to pull out or report him, he shows them this, reminds them they're complicit. Mutually assured destruction." Diana looked over Grace's shoulder. "That's wire fraud, securities fraud. He's not just going to lose his license, he's going to prison." We left 3 hours later with boxes of documents, the flash drive, Richard's journal, and enough evidence to bury him. As we loaded everything into Diana's car, my phone buzzed. Ethan Cole. "You need to see this. Now." Attached was a screenshot of an email from Richard to Thomas Brennan, sent 20 minutes ago. "The evidence is contaminated. Laura broke into my home and stole privileged documents. I want her arrested for burglary and her attorney disbarred. And Tom, find out who's feeding her information. Offer them money to recant or threaten them with conspiracy. I don't care which, this ends now." Below, Ethan added, "He's talking about me, and he's planning something worse. Watch your back." I showed Grace. Her expression hardened. "He's desperate. That's good. Desperate people make mistakes, but it also means he's dangerous. Laura, I think it's time we bring in law enforcement. Not just for the divorce, but for the fraud." "Will they listen?" After today, after what we found? Grace hefted the box containing Richard's journal and flash drive. They won't have a choice. That night, Grace filed a referral with the FBI's Economic Crimes Unit and the SEC's Enforcement Division. By Monday morning, federal agents would be reviewing everything, and Richard Mitchell's empire would begin its final collapse. The subpoena from the FBI arrived Tuesday. The SEC interview took 6 hours. Special Agent Marcus Chen led me through every detail. 2 other agents were present, Patricia Williams from the SEC and an IRS criminal investigations officer who introduced himself only as Agent Torres. They were thorough, professional, and clearly shocked. "Mrs. Mitchell," Agent Chen said as we finished, "I want you to understand what you've handed us. This isn't just divorce fraud. This is wire fraud, securities fraud, tax evasion, money laundering. We're talking RICO, racketeer-influenced and corrupt organizations. If we can prove Richard coordinated with his mother and Thomas Brennan to systematically defraud investors, this becomes a conspiracy case." "How long will the investigation take?" "Months, probably. But we're moving fast. We've frozen the Singapore accounts. We're subpoenaing Mitchell Capital's complete financial records going back 7 years. And we're interviewing every investor who might have been defrauded." He paused. "Richard Mitchell is going to fight this with everything he has. Expensive lawyers, PR firms, political connections. Are you prepared?" I thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago, terrified in Thomas Brennan's office, believing I deserved to be discarded. "I'm prepared," I said. The investors moved faster than the FBI. Within 2 weeks, 12 major clients had withdrawn from Mitchell Capital, over $400 million total. The fund was collapsing. Lawsuits came next, class actions from investors, individual suits from pension funds, Jennifer Harrison's employment case expanding to include RICO claims. The New York Attorney General announced her own investigation. Richard was drowning in legal challenges, each more expensive than the last. Grace showed me the financial analysis. He's burning through cash. Legal fees alone are probably $500,000 a month. The frozen offshore accounts mean he can't access that money. His liquid assets are depleting fast. Good. Better than good. It means he'll have to settle your divorce to preserve resources for criminal defense. We're in a strong position. The settlement offer came 3 weeks later. Thomas Brennan had been replaced by Victoria Marsh, who had the exhausted demeanor of someone cleaning up someone else's disaster. "My client is prepared to offer the following," she said, sliding documents across the table. "Full disclosure of all marital assets, equitable distribution per New York law, approximately 5% of legitimate marital property. That comes to roughly $2.3 million in cash and assets, plus spousal maintenance of $15,000 per month for 5 years. That was 23 times the prenup settlement. We'll need verification these assets are actually his to distribute," Grace said. "Given the ongoing federal investigation, I'm concerned he's pledging money he doesn't have. The cash portion will come from liquidating his share of the penthouse. The rest is verifiable stock holdings in legitimate companies, nothing connected to Mitchell Capital." "And the prenup?" Victoria grimaced. "We're prepared to concede the prenup was unconscionable. We won't contest your motion to void it." Richard was surrendering. "What about divorce grounds?" I asked. "What's he willing to admit?" "We'll agree to fault-based grounds, cruel and inhuman treatment, adultery, abandonment, whatever you want in the decree." "I want him to admit he manipulated me, that he deliberately isolated me financially and emotionally, that he planned the divorce for months while lying to me. I want it in writing, part of the public record." "Mrs. Mitchell, those are my terms. He tells the truth, even if it's just in a legal document, or we go to trial and I tell it for him in much more detail." Victoria looked pained. "I'll discuss it with my client." 2 days later, Richard called me directly. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Laura," and his voice sounded hollow, "we need to talk." "We really don't. Please, 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet at a coffee shop in Midtown midday, public enough to be safe. He was already there, sitting in the back corner. He looked terrible. Weight lost, suit rumpled, the polished veneer completely gone. "Thank you for coming," he said as I sat. "You have 5 minutes. I need you to call off the FBI. Tell them you exaggerated, that you misunderstood." "Absolutely not. Laura, I'm going to prison. Do you understand? Federal prison. My life is over." "Your life? Your life?" I leaned forward, keeping my voice low despite the anger. "You tried to erase mine, Richard. You spent years making me feel worthless. You staged my public humiliation. You manufactured psychiatric records. You broke into my sister's apartment. You threatened me, manipulated me, and stole years of my life. And you did it while defrauding people of their retirement money. No, I made mistakes. You committed crimes systematically for years. The FBI isn't pursuing you because of me. They're pursuing you because you're a criminal." He slumped. "I loved you once, at the beginning." "No, you didn't. You loved the idea of me, the compliant wife who made you look good. The moment I became inconvenient, you discarded me. That's not love, Richard. That's ownership." "What do you want from me? An apology? Fine, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for all of it." I studied his face, looking for genuine remorse. I saw only self-pity. "I don't want your apology. I want you to face consequences. Real consequences. And then I want you to disappear from my life completely." "The settlement. Will you take it?" "If you agree to my terms, full admission of fault, public record, and you leave me alone forever, no contact, no lawyers, nothing. Done. And one more thing." I pulled out my phone, opened a photo of Charlotte's letter. "Your mother. She orchestrated this with you. She needs to face consequences too." Richard's jaw tightened. "She was just trying to protect family assets." "She conspired to commit fraud. The FBI has her emails. She's going down with you, Richard. Accept that." He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the moment he realized. I wasn't the weak, broken woman he'd married. I was someone else entirely, someone who wouldn't be manipulated or intimidated or dismissed. "You've changed," he said finally. "Yes," I agreed. "I got stronger." Funny how that happens when someone stops trying to make you small. I stood to leave. "Laura?" His voice stopped me. "Was any of it real? Did you ever actually love me?" I looked back at him. This man I'd promised forever to, who'd systematically destroyed me, who was now facing consequences. "I loved who I thought you were," I said quietly. "I mourned that person when I realized he never existed. But I'm done mourning. I'm done with you completely." And I walked out without looking back. The settlement was finalized 2 weeks later. The divorce decree was damning. The court finds that defendant Richard Mitchell engaged in cruel and inhuman treatment of plaintiff Laura Mitchell, including financial abuse, emotional manipulation, and deliberate isolation. The court further finds that defendant fraudulently induced plaintiff to sign a prenuptial agreement that was unconscionable. Said agreement is hereby void. I received $2.3 million in assets, the first year's spousal support paid in full, and complete legal freedom from Richard Mitchell. Charlotte was worse off. The FBI had traced her involvement in offshore accounts, and the IRS was pursuing her for tax evasion. Her socialite reputation was destroyed. Mitchell Capital Management officially dissolved 3 months later. The liquidation barely covered investor claims. The criminal trial was scheduled for the following year. Federal prosecutors were confident. Thomas Brennan was disbarred. Vanessa Cruz lost her personal training certification. Last I heard, she'd moved to California. Sophie Martinez got a job with Diana Lee's law firm, working with employment discrimination victims. Rosa Hernandez received a settlement from the Household Workers Union after they sued Richard for labor violations. Ethan Cole testified against Richard in exchange for immunity and was hired by a white-collar crime consultancy. Jennifer Harrison's lawsuit settled for an undisclosed amount, but rumors suggested over $10 million split among the 7 women. And me? I took the first $100,000 of my settlement and donated it to a legal aid fund for women escaping abusive marriages. The amount Richard thought I was worth, I explained to the press. Turns out it's worth more in the right hands. With the rest, I started rebuilding. 6 months after the divorce finalized, I stood in a midtown office building lobby looking at the directory. Laura Mitchell Consulting. Suite 1204. My company, my name, my future. My consulting firm specialized in helping women in high net worth divorces document financial abuse, find legal resources, and rebuild their careers. I partnered with divorce attorneys, forensic accountants, and therapists to provide comprehensive support. The waiting list was 3 months long. Rachel joined me in the elevator carrying coffee and bagels. Big day, first staff meeting in your own office. Our office, I corrected. She'd quit her nursing job to become my operations manager. The suite was small but professional. I deliberately avoided glass and marble aesthetic. This space was warm, wooden furniture, plants, art from local galleries, a bookshelf with legal resources and recovery memoirs. My 3 employees were already there, a paralegal named Marcus, a financial analyst named Keisha, and a social media manager named Priya, who'd helped me turn my TikTok platform into a legitimate business tool. "Morning, boss," Priya said, holding up her phone. "Your video about red flags and prenups hit 2 million views overnight. We've got 50 consultation requests." I'd continued posting on TikTok and my blog, not about Richard anymore, but about systemic issues. Financial coercion, prenuptial agreements that crossed into exploitation, how to document abuse, legal resources for women with limited funds. My follower count had grown to 1.8 million. Several publishers had reached out about book deals. After the meeting, I sat alone in my office, looking at the framed photo on my desk. Not of Richard. I'd thrown away every picture. This was from last month, me crossing the finish line of a 5K race, sweating and grinning, 30 pounds lighter than at the birthday party, but still far from the size when Richard and I married. I didn't care. This body had carried me through hell and come out stronger. It deserved respect, not shame. Christian, my trainer, had taught me that. Over 6 months, we'd worked together 3 times a week. Not to make me thin, but to make me strong. To reclaim my body as mine. And somewhere along the way, between the strength training and the honesty and the mutual respect, something else had developed. My phone buzzed. Text from Christian. "Lunch after your 2 p.m. client, Ty?" I smiled and replied, "Perfect. See you then." It wasn't serious yet. We were both too cautious, but it was something honest and equal and built on seeing each other clearly. The criminal trial began 6 weeks later. I didn't attend. Grace went as my representative and texted updates. Prosecution opening devastating. They have him on 12 counts. Ethan's testimony flawless. Richard looked murderous. Charlotte took the stand, threw Richard under the bus, said everything was his idea. Verdict, guilty on all counts. Sentencing in 6 weeks. When sentencing day came, I did attend. I sat in the back of the federal courtroom and watched Richard stand before the judge, thinner and grayer than I'd ever seen him. Judge Patricia Morrison read from her prepared statement. "Mr. Mitchell, you were given every advantage, wealth, education, connections. You chose to use those advantages to defraud hardworking people, to harass and abuse women, to manipulate the legal system. You showed no remorse, no accountability." Richard stood motionless. "The sentencing guidelines suggest 78 to 97 months. I'm sentencing you to 97 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years supervised release. You will pay restitution of $12.7 million. You are permanently barred from serving as an officer or director of any public company." The gavel came down. Richard was led away in handcuffs. He looked back once, scanning the courtroom, and his eyes found mine. I met his gaze steadily, then looked away. He was no longer my husband, my abuser, or even my enemy. He was just a man facing consequences, and I was a woman who'd survived him and built something beautiful from the wreckage. Charlotte received 30 months for tax evasion and conspiracy. Her sentencing judge noted her age and cooperation, but emphasized that privilege does not exempt anyone from the law. 1 year after the courthouse showdown, I threw a party, not a gala, just a gathering at my new apartment, a brownstone in Brooklyn I'd purchased with settlement money, bright and airy, and completely unlike the cold marble penthouse. Grace was there, celebrating her promotion to name partner, Sophie, now in law school, Rosa, whose son had just graduated and landed a job at a civil rights organization. Ethan, who'd written a book about corporate fraud, Jennifer and the other women from the Mitchell Capital lawsuit, all thriving in new careers, Rachel and Christian laughing in the kitchen, and Priya taking photos because everything we did still lived partly online, but now on our terms. "Speech," someone called, and the room quieted. I stood, glass of champagne in hand, surrounded by the people who'd helped me survive and rebuild. 2 years ago, I began, I was standing at a birthday party, holding a champagne glass just like this, while my mother-in-law told a room full of people I was worthless. I believed her. I believed I deserved to be thrown away because I'd gained weight, because I couldn't get pregnant, because I wasn't perfect enough. I looked around at these faces I'd come to love. But you all taught me about something different. You taught me that worth isn't measured in pounds or bank accounts or other people's approval. It's measured in courage, in honesty, in the willingness to stand up and say, this is wrong and I deserve better. You taught me that broken things can be rebuilt stronger, that trauma can be transformed into purpose. I raised my glass. So here's to all of us, survivors, fighters, rebuilders. Here's to choosing ourselves. And here's to the future we're building, one brave choice at a time. Hear, hear. The room erupted. Christian slipped his arm around my waist, kissed my temple. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of me too, I said, and meant it completely. 6 months later, I stood on the TED Talk stage in Vancouver, looking out at 2,000 people and millions more watching online. My topic: the weight of worthiness, rebuilding self after betrayal. I'd told the story one more time, say, not in all its details, but in its essence. The manipulation, the isolation, the systematic destruction of self-worth, and then the fight back, the evidence gathering, the legal battle, the public exposure. But I'd spent most of the talk on what came after, the therapy, the rebuilding, the hard work of learning to trust myself again, the consulting practice, the advocacy, the book, the life I'd created from the ashes. Now I was at the end, the final words. People often ask me, I said, if it was worth it. The public battle, the scrutiny, the pain of reliving trauma. They ask if I regret not taking the quiet settlement and disappearing. I paused, meeting eyes in the audience. Here's what I tell them. My husband and his family tried to make me disappear. They told me I was too heavy to matter, too broken to fix, too worthless to fight for. They spent years making me smaller, physically, emotionally, psychologically. They tried to erase me completely. I smiled. But here's what they didn't understand. When you try to make someone small enough to fit your narrative, you risk crushing them entirely. And if you crush them past their breaking point, sometimes something unexpected happens. Sometimes they don't break. Sometimes they compress into something dense and powerful and unbreakable, like carbon becoming diamond under pressure. I let that image sit. They told me I was too heavy to stand up, but they were wrong. I stood up. And when I did, I brought the weight of truth with me, evidence, witnesses, facts they couldn't deny. I brought the weight of every woman they'd ever abused, every investor they'd ever defrauded, every lie they'd ever told. I brought all of that weight crashing down on them. The audience was absolutely silent. So yes, it was worth it because I learned something crucial. The weight they said made me worthless, that weight of truth, of justice, of refusing to be erased, that weight was actually my power. They called me too heavy to matter, but in the end, I was exactly heavy enough to bring down their empire. I stepped forward, closer to the edge of the stage. If you're in a situation where someone is trying to make you smaller, trying to convince you that you're too much or not enough, trying to erase you, remember this: your weight matters. The weight of your truth, your dignity, your refusal to disappear. That weight is not a burden, it's your weapon. I delivered the final line. They told me I carried too much weight, but it turns out I was carrying exactly the right amount, the perfect weight of revenge. The audience erupted, standing ovation, applause that went on for minutes. But I wasn't thinking about them anymore. I was thinking about the woman I'd been 2 years ago, trembling in a bathroom, believing she deserved humiliation. I was thinking about every email I'd received from women who'd left their abusers after reading my story. I was thinking about the consulting clients I'd helped, the the corporate trainings that were changing workplace culture, the legal reforms my advocacy had influenced. I was thinking about Christian waiting backstage, about the life we were building together, slowly, carefully, with mutual respect. I was thinking about the apartment I owned, the company I'd built, the book contract I'd just signed. I was thinking about how I'd transformed trauma into purpose, pain into power, victimhood into victory. And I realized I'd done more than survive Richard Mitchell. I'd become someone he could never have imagined, someone strong enough to carry the weight of truth and use it to build something beautiful. Someone who'd taken the worst thing that ever happened to her and turned it into the catalyst for the best things that came after. Someone who understood that revenge wasn't about destruction. It was about reconstruction. Not of who I'd been before Richard, but of who I'd become because I survived him and then surpassed him entirely. The applause finally died down. I walked off stage into Christian's arms. "Perfect," he whispered. "No," I corrected, smiling. I was real, and that's better. Later, my phone would explode with messages. The TED Talk would go viral. My consulting practice would expand internationally. My book would stay on bestseller lists for 40 weeks. But in that moment, backstage in Vancouver, I just stood there in Christian's embrace and let myself feel what I'd fought so hard to achieve: peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of purpose. Not the silence of submission, but the quiet confidence of someone who knew her worth and wouldn't negotiate it away ever again. They'd tried to make me too heavy to rise. Instead, they'd given me the perfect weight to fly. They told me I carried too much weight to matter. I carried exactly enough to bring them down. In the end, revenge isn't about destruction. It's about discovering you're strong enough to carry the truth, no matter how heavy it gets. That's the perfect weight. Heavy enough to matter, light enough to move forward, balanced enough to build something beautiful from the ruins. Laura Mitchell, from The Perfect Weight of Revenge.